Now, composting, it can be a very hard sort of object in the garden to do. It can be very sort of difficult and interesting, but once you've mastered it, you'll get amazing homemade compost. So in this video, I'm going to give you the top tips of composting and what you can and what you can't compost. Let's get to it. Now these are my compost bins, which over the past couple of days I've actually just finished, which is amazing because they've all got their slats. I can just slat them up and put them back in. It's as simple as that. So, what is compost? Well, compost, it's not what you think it is. It's not chucking everything in and just leaving it for a year or two. It's the breakdown of organic matter. So if you say like horse manure, if you let that rot down for a year or two, that is compost. That is horse manure compost. Let's say if you let wood chip rot down for 3 years, that's wood chip compost. So compost is something organic, which I think it means something that's been alive, and it's been in the breakdown process to become compost. And you can make incredibly good, high fibrous, high nutrients, high in fungal, all that good stuff, compost at home in your own garden at your allotment. And there are a few things you can't compost. You can't compost, say, dogs or cats, their manure. You can't compost their poo-poos and their doo-doos and their wee-wees. You can't compost bones. Definitely not bones, because they just don't break down. I wouldn't say thick logs unless they've been chopped up and shredded and became wood chips, and then you can compost that. Nothing too sort of chunky, but there is also a ratio to compost. So you don't just chuck everything in and leave it for a year or two. You can, but it will take longer. It will take 4 years. It will get that sort of smelly smell. So, without further ado, I'll tell you what you can and can't compost. So let's start off with the greens. So a green it could be something that's green, but it's not. So something like a coffee ground, that's a green, because it's got nutrients in it. I think the nutrient is the green and the carbon's the brown. Correct me if I'm wrong, don't take that for word, but I'm just guessing, because I think it's that. Now, greens could be anything like a beetroot leaf here, which is what I've just picked. This is a beetroot leaf, it's also a green. You could perfectly compost that. Now the ratio to compost, which is probably my ratio, I go off a bucket. You can do whatever size bucket, you just have to keep and use the same bucket for the same mix. So I will put all my greens in here, I'll chop them all up and then chuck them in the compost. And every 1 bucket of green, you want 2 buckets of brown. Now browns can be like shredded up paper, shredded up cardboard. No plants that have died and gone brown, because they've only lost their moisture. They haven't actually lost the nutrients, they've just lost their moisture. So every bucket of green, you've got to put 2 buckets of brown. So say if I put a bucket of grass clippings in, I'll put 2 buckets of shredded cardboard in after. Right, I hope that makes sense. Let's move on. So say if you've done all that, you've put your 2 buckets of brown in and your 1 bucket of green in, and you just keep doing that until the bin is full. You then put a plastic over it and maybe possibly a piece of carpet, just to keep the warmth in, just to keep the heat in. And say after a couple of weeks you sort of unlift the carpet and the plastic, and you smell this sort of, not sewage smell, but not nice, yucky smell. It's because it's too moist. You need some more browns in there. So if you put a couple buckets of browns in there, mix it all in, and then give it a watering can or 2, just to keep it moist, because you can't make compost from, well, dry. You can, but it's going to take a lot longer. So to speed it up, put some, say, water in it, if you want to speed it up, put some cow's manure in it, some chicken manure, some duck manure, some horse manure. If you want to speed up your compost process, say something like that in. Don't buy any of them fancy products in the garden centres, compost additive and stuff like that. Don't get that. Just do something natural, do something free, and it will compost a lot quicker. We, at the minute, are trying to get something a pack of poo, but it's a bit difficult. But we're getting there. Right, shall we move on? So, what to make a compost bin out of? These here are made out of pallets and pallets and pallets. This one's coming off here, it's only been a couple days old. So I've got a pallet on the outside, which is in there. I've got a pallet. Then I've put a plastic material in, which I'm going to be honest, it was a waste of money. But I've done it. So that just helps to keep the warmth in for me. Yeah. So that just helps keep the warmth in. Then I've put another layer of pallet wood on the inside, which is just to keep this plastic from ruining, because this will all shred up. And then I've painted it just to preserve the pallet wood. Now you can do anything as basic as just 4 pallets tied together with a bit of string. It doesn't have to be that difficult. You don't have to do slats like I've done, but I'll show you how I've done my slats. Now these are just basic scaffolding boards. As you can see here, that's the pallet there. I've put pallet wood all down there. I've put a piece of batten the long ways. Now I've put more pallet wood on underneath, which creates that slat. Then I've cut the scaffolding boards to the perfect length for it, so they all slot in nicely. And you can just get it out when you need it, so it doesn't all fall out. Because if you have an opening door, something like that, it's all just going to fall out at once. So that's why I like that. So also, a few things that I wouldn't recommend composting are diseased materials, or say something like couch grass, buttercup weed. They've all got different names. Bindweed. You know, some people do compost them. They do compost them. You can compost them. I don't. Just the risk of them taking over the whole compost bin, because they've done it once in my compost bin, and I don't want it to happen again. So I don't put any couch grass, any sort of buttercup, any sort of weeds which thrive in anything. So, but you can compost them, but I don't. Something I won't also do is disease material. So say, if you checked out, it's my last video of my tomatoes, they've all got blight. I burnt them on the fire. Well, not me, but I put them on the communal fire, and they got burnt because I wouldn't compost them, because it will just spread through the compost. And if you spread it out on your beds, it's just, you're just going to have blight year after year. Also behind me here, so say if you've got your tomatoes, once they've done for the year, they're done for the year, aren't they? Oh look, they're coming out here. Once they're done for the year, they're done for the year. Okay, once all the tomatoes are off, it's the end of the season, put them all in the compost bin. The smaller you cut things up, the quicker and quicker it will compost. Now, the different methods of compost are very different. I started off using a water butt, which had no holes in the bottom, so it had no drainage, no way worms would get in there. There's a bunch of couch grass in there, a bunch of bindweed in there, so it wasn't that good. Then I switched to these Dalek composters, which have the twist off lids. This isn't my one, I'm just using it for an example, which have the twist off lids in the bottom. I made very lumpy, bad compost. I don't think I've done the ratio right in that. So, but you can use them, you can have amazing compost with them. So say if all my bins are full of compost, I will always get 1 or 2 of these just to have another compost going, because you always want a compost going. Which now I've moved on to my 3-bay system. So the first one on the left, which I showed you when I took all my slats off, that's always going to get filled and filled and filled and filled. When that's to the top, I'm going to leave it for a week, 2 or 3, just so it can compress, because it will go down quick. and then that's going to get transferred into the second bay while I'm filling up that first one. So when the first one is at the top and I leave it for 3 weeks, the second one goes into the third one, the first one goes into the second one, and the first one keeps getting filled up, if that makes sense. So the third one you should have ready-made compost, but I think it just finishes off the compost making, which is all very good. And when you aerate it is when you dig it in and put it in the next bay. I don't think you need slatted sides. People say you definitely need slatted sides. I don't think you do. It's just that for slatted sides for the air to get through. You don't. I've got them on the front. That's just for help of ease with the compost. You don't. I have the full sides just so that it keeps the warmth in better. But you do you. You can make amazing compost out of these as well. So, yes. So the microphone was, don't know, it's run out of battery. But all I'm saying is please like and subscribe. It really does help. It really does sort of motivate me to do more videos. I couldn't, be more happy when I look at my phone and see another subscriber. So please subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you next time. So in that case, chaps, I wish you the best of luck with composting. Make sure you stick with all them composting tips and tricks I've told you. Go see some other videos on composting. And I wish you the best of luck. See you next week. Bye bye.